guess we could start. Welcome to White Line Fever Live. Appreciate you tuning in. Bit inconsistent, the programs at the moment. They're not on the same week at the same time like they should be, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, to subscribe and also support the program, patreon.com/White Line Fever. Our guest is a man who who's done a lot of things, but he took Wales to the semi-finals of the 1995 and 2000 Rugby League World Cups. Welcome, Clive Griffiths. How are you, Clive?
Outstanding, Steve. Outstanding.
Good to see your face. Now, what are you up to these days? You're coaching rugby. Yeah. Rugby union in Doncaster. You actually look exactly the same. You look exactly the same as the last time I saw you.
You are full of compliments. No, a little bit, a few more wrinkles, a bit blonder on the sides, but a little bit less on top due to the rigors of coaching. But still breathing and enjoying it the same as before.
So you're coaching rugby union at Doncaster Knights, right? So how's COVID impacted on that?
Well, just to update you on that, I finished at Doncaster in May. It was time to step down after 9 seasons at the club. There was 1 and a gap and an 8. So it was time to step down and move on to other things. But the other things, obviously, with COVID, everything else I had organised post Doncaster, have been put on hold because of COVID. So at the moment, it's trying to keep fit and gardening.
Awesome.
So you could say I'm on garden leave.
Plenty of water for the garden today, although it's just cleared here in London. Now, normally on here we talk about what's in the news and we get very excited about controversies and stuff like that. But I'd rather actually go back to the good old days a little bit in this chat with you because I just been, I spoke to you for my book, Two Tribes, last week, and that was wonderful. We talked about the 1996 Great Britain tour, which is sort of central to the period that is covered in the book. But I wondered if we could go a little bit further back to that great, I guess, the build-up and the aftermath to 1995 World Cup, which was a great moment for Welsh Rugby League with so many great players who changed codes to play rugby league. And the team was revived in 1991 and a 68-0 win over Papua New Guinea in 1991, where Jonathan Davis had a blinder and scored a shed load of points. Do you remember much about that night and the excitement that, that the team was back?
It may surprise you, but it seems like it was yesterday. Going back to where I live down in West Wales, and the little village called Penclawdd, which was 8 miles away from Swansea. We played at the Vetch Field, and as a kid, used to go and watch the Swans play there. But to go back, and obviously we got family at the game, and all the hype surrounding the match with the boys coming up from rugby union, and it was, we'd watched Papua New Guinea. They played Great Britain in a series before that. A few of the boys who played against them. And we were going to be sort of the launch pad of the tour. Well, it sort of dampened the tour because obviously we gave them such a thumping that, it impacted on the test matches that were about to be played with Great Britain. It also impacted on a number of our boys because they played so well, they got in the Great Britain team. But it was a huge crowd on the night, a fantastic occasion, and we sort of launched rugby league then on that night. And, the sort of momentum continued right up to, as you say, 95. And then obviously most of the boys went back to rugby union because rugby union went open in 95. And then we had to sort of rebuild and then up to the 2000 World Cup when I finished. But going back to 91, it was a special night, really special.
And how was the public reaction? The public seems to have been quite open to a rugby league team, maybe Welsh Rugby Union not so open. How did you kind of manage to get acceptance from the public and be embraced, so openly as you were?
Well, before the game, obviously, we had to sell the game, and the lads like Jonathan and those lads who were converted, we did a lot of press conferences and PR work down in West Wales, particularly in Swansea. I'd advertise the game as much as possible, and sell it. And, we did quite well for that first game. And as I said, there was a sizable crowd on that night. And of course, the win itself and the manner of the win sort of grabbed the attention of everybody and the excitement for things going forward, because we had some really mouth-watering games scheduled to come up, like New Zealand as well, and then Australia. So it was indeed a sort of a turning point for the Welsh team, which had gone into hibernation for a while, of course. And these boys were incredible. They did everything in their power to make sure it was a success on and off the field.
In 1992, you had your first win on French soil in 30 years. And then in 1993, took on the touring New Zealand team. And then in 1994, took on the great 1994 Kangaroos. What are your recollections of those camps and the sort of vibe around those matches?
Well, again, sheer excitement, to be honest, Steve, and a great challenge for us all. We'd all converted from rugby union, and here we are being thrust up against the world's best, in their own code by their own right, but they'd been sort of brought up on. Yes, there were a few converts in New Zealand and Australian camps, but predominantly they were in the Australia, where state of origin players, Albaniga and so forth. And I remember going back, so Quentin Pongia and people like that playing for Stephen Kearney, playing for the Kiwis. They had a damn good side, and we give them a heck of a game at Swansea. We didn't run up with our winners, but we came out with a lot of credit in that game. But obviously, I remember the carnage downstairs when we played Australia at Ninian Park and went down. David Young had got a massive cut over his eye, which required numerous stitches, and John Devereux broke his jaw, a massive collision with Mamaninga. So the boys did it tough that day, and but they never gave in, although we were hopelessly outgunned. But it taught us a lot of good lessons, me as a coach and the boys as rugby league players. And I think it stood us in good stead for what's about to happen in the next few years.
1995 World Cup on home soil. I won't try to show off my knowledge of score lines or anything. I'll just sort of ask you to talk about the build up to that tournament and the expectation. And obviously the game against Western Samoa was a high point for the sport in Wales going, and Wales did play the very first international ever of rugby league. But when you was assembling that team, and then the team went into camp, can you tell us what it was like?
Well, again, sheer excitement, because you can't get much bigger than Rugby League World Cup, and we had been reinforced by a number of what they were termed at the time Anglos, but I've had lots to say about that since those days. We had people like Calvin Skerritt, Neil Cowie, Martin Hall, Richie Ayres, Paul Aitchison come on board. And really, really embraced the whole feeling of Welshness, and fitted in with ease to our group. And they added to us, of course, because of their rugby league nous, but not to detract from the way that the Welsh lads who converted to rugby league played in that tournament, because each and every one of them were immense. What I will tell you about that, Steve, is that we developed a bond and a togetherness, a unity that was second to none. I've never experienced much like it since. It was a camp which was together for a number of weeks, and it was a pretty intense camp because the games came thick and fast, and they were very brutal games as well. but everybody was so good in terms of the way they conducted themselves on and off the field. And again, the way they embraced the Welsh public. And we stayed in Cardiff, and then we travelled to the games, and then we moved north to the semi-final. But, you know, they'd done themselves proud, as I said, on and off the field. And particularly, you know, in the first two games against France and the epic game against Samoa in Swansea again. And then we moved north, and we took an unprecedented number of spectators at Old Trafford for the semi-final. They've never been heard of before. So it had gripped the imagination of the Welsh public really well. And, you know, it was a special day, you know, on Old Trafford, even though we lost, you know, at the end of the game, you know, when all the boys went up to Stretford End and, you know, sort of clapped the thousands of Welsh fans who'd taken the time to travel north to support us. You know, it was so intense, as I said, and, you know, we played France at a short turn against Samoa, and in the shorter turnaround against England, which was our undoing, really. And the physical side of the game against Samoa was a telling factor. It was delight again to go.
Sorry, it was like a kind of. It was like a kind of scene out of a war movie, really. That game against Samoa. You know, some of the things that were said before and after. I know Graham Lowe. Afterwards, he was a coach of Samoa. Was you know, said it was the toughest game he'd seen. What was it? Can you take us inside the sheds before and after that match? You know, tell us how the guys prepared themselves mentally for a game like that, and what state they were in afterwards.
Well, I think you had seasoned professionals there and players who had played to the highest level, intensity, whether they were rugby union converts or bona fide rugby league players. So they knew what it took to be in the cauldron of an event like that, and a game like that. We'd beaten France comfortably. Samoa then absolutely thumped France, and, you know, we watched the video, and, you know, you got someone like Inga Tinkermala, you know, and it's like Tony Solomona, these huge fellas. John Schuster, you know, the names, Willie Poaching, they had sort of household names in their team. And we knew we had to bring our Class A game, all of us, me as a coach, you know, the management, the players, everybody. We had to be really tight together to bring an intensity and a game plan to the night that would beat them. And it was indeed ferocious. And we just had the 25th anniversary of that tournament, and it's been dialogued quite recently in the Welsh press about it. And, you know, everybody that was there that night, like yourself, you know, will never forget the atmosphere, the singing, the standard of play, but the ferociousness of the game and the intensity of the hits, which were unbelievable. Again, going back to West Wales, again was special, but this was even bigger than '91 because this was a World Cup, and in both our games, our pool games, we had the kickoffs delayed because there were so many people who wanted to get in, and indeed, in fact, the veg field was sold out. There were people locked out in the veg. So again, you know, from '91 to '95, you know, it was gradually building and building and building. Here we were now in this cauldron, and, you know, the prospect of a semi-final at Old Trafford against England, which was obviously a great attraction as well. So, yes, lots of great memories. And after the game, nobody left the ground. So, you know, the players, I joined them at the end. You know, all the management, we did another lap of honour, but we went across the big West Bank, and, you know, it was you can never forget moments like that, Steve. It oozed Welshness, and it oozed sort of pride, passion, and everything that goes with it.
Now, the bottom would fall out because the Super League war basically forced the hand of rugby union. Rugby union went openly professional, as you say. You've got a favourite saying about rugby union players and rugby league players. Do you want to repeat it?
it's been used before. Tony Collins used it in the Code Breakers program. I was asked, I went back to do a chat at my own school, and I was asked the question, what was the difference between, well, what have you found the difference between rugby league and rugby union? And I just said, rugby league players pay tax. It's as simple as that. So it's been used a few times since then, and yeah, it was just that was one of the things that tickled me pink when people criticised rugby league and so forth. That I obviously had experienced what was going on at the time, and in '95, obviously it all changed, and a dramatic effect on the Welsh Rugby League team and the game in general. But the players, in rugby union were well looked after then and didn't turn pro.
But in 1996, you went to Wales went to the first ever World Nines, which we still have them every now and then. We had one last year in Sydney. Now that was in Fiji. It was the launch of Super League, and it happened against the backdrop of a court case in Sydney where Super League was subsequently outlawed. We had the ARL driving, Bob Abbott from the ARL riding his bicycle around the island, telling players they couldn't play because they were contracted to the ARL. It's a tournament that's kind of lost in rugby league history. It's a few grainy bits of footage on YouTube, but most people forget it was even played. Terrible weather, and some of the best rugby league talent in the world on a tiny island playing in front of a few hundred people. What are your recollections of the 1996 World Nines in Suva?
Recollections first. Martin Hall came with us, and because of that row, he didn't play. He became coach, water carrier, a lot. I remember the monsoon weather we had after day one, or it was washed out one of the days, and I had to have, which resulted in the tournament having to be revamped. I remember then the parade going through to Suva, and all the teams lined up, and thousands and thousands of Fijians there lining the streets and give us an outstanding welcome. As much kava as you could drink if you wanted to, but they were hanging out of everywhere, windows, climbing up trees, and just everything was just to get a vantage point, just to see this, these teams coming through. I would absolutely idolized. And I remember having a chat with Ricky Stewart on the way through, and it was just a sight to behold, really. Well supported then in the games, but that day was washed out. You never ever thought about what was going to happen, and of course we slipped up against PNG. We lost 10-8 in our pool game, and we went into the second tier tournament, which we won. Again, beating Western Samoa in the final. And Willie Pocheng again was part of that team, and he said, and they wanted to see me again. But they were great. The Samoans just they were a cross between, maybe you said before, you've heard it, a cross between Rockwell and Lassie. They rip you to pieces and go for help afterwards. They were that nice after the game, and they were superb sports afterwards, and what was done on the field was soon forgotten. And we had some really, really good times with them off the field. We did with the Kiwis as well, who stayed in the same hotel as us. So the togetherness of the teams and everything that went with it, in the light of what you said was going on off the field, and if it was to come back with the Golden Canoe, there was a sort of won the cup. It was a big boat it was superbly carved, and that's now in the Welsh Hall of Fame. So we came back with something, and it was another sort of landmark for us to as a country to win something. Even if it was a nines tournament, it was still something prestigious for us to do.
Now, 1996, again, the sort of golden period wasn't over. You won the European Championship in 1996, and then heading into the Great Britain tour of the South Pacific. So, at that point, Welsh Rugby League was still on a real high, wasn't it?
Yeah, we're still around. We'd lost a lot of players, as I said, 96. 95, actually, we won the European
Sorry.
Championship.
Yeah.
96, we came runners up. Well, we gave England a good game. We beat them, obviously, in 95 close, and then they beat us in 96 close. We'd lost a lot of players back. Some of the boys had stayed and played to play for the South Wales team that was launched in that year. But the 2 years in particular were pretty outstanding and on different for different reasons. 95, we won that European Championship for the first time in 57 years. Not many people sort of remember that. And of course, in 95, obviously, as we've mentioned, it went open. In 96, the South Wales team then disbanded. And like I said, I went on the Lions tour and came back, and there was no job there. And that's when I went back into rugby union, 96.
So how would you sum up the lost
with
opportunity there, Clive? Like, to explain it to the viewers and listeners, that lost opportunity.
Yeah. Well, we did make a representation to Rugby League Council. We were in great talks with Cardiff City Council, and we got the Cardiff Arms Park to play. There was prospective sponsor ready for us. We'd done great work off the field. Mike Nicholas was heavily involved in that as well, and it was there for us. There was a great opportunity, and I do believe if Rugby League had grabbed the nettle at the time and been bold, and not thought about the fear of failure or the reduced amount of funding that other clubs may have had to take to get us into Super League, then we would have had a New Zealand situation, Auckland Warriors situation in Wales, and we maintained it because of the flow would have been there. Another avenue for it, and of course geographically it was easy. It was not as difficult to get to Catalans or to Toronto, for example. So and the great history of Welsh Rugby League as well could have continued via the Welsh club team, which would then have supplemented the Welsh national team and kept that strong as well. So it's a double-edged sword to it, really, but it was voted out, and the rest is history, as they say.
Now, all this stuff going wrong, losing players back to rugby union, and having the idea of a professional club killed off by the Rugby Football League. Yet you get to halftime in Huddersfield in the next World Cup in 2000, and you're leading Australia. How did you do that? How did you, over those 4 years, how did you keep the national side so competitive that they were leading Australia at halftime in a World Cup semi-final?
Well, everyone knew, again, going back to that Samoa game, I mentioned about players knowing that it was a special game coming up here. They knew that, if we really didn't perform on that night, it could be embarrassing because Australia was just smashing everybody outside. I think was it Russia? They put 100 points on.
Yep.
We won the games. I mean, it was just, the teams that the players that are at their disposal, it was just incredible team. And they, as I said, they smashed everybody before them. But we had the two pool games. Starting off, we'd won them. The match against New Zealand was a dead rubber, so we rested a lot of players. And we played PNG in the quarterfinal, and I remember, I think it was Wayne Bennett's brother was coaching Papua New Guinea at the time.
Mm.
And Adrian Lamb was the captain. They said some disparaging things before the game, which motivated us a bit more. So, we beat them at Widnes, and then we went on to that semi-final, as you mentioned. With that injuries, which necessitated me going back to get John Dever and Paul Moriarty, because we were just had no more players left. Took a bit of flack over that, but we got it through. And it was just a matter of trying to give the boys some belief against overwhelming odds that we could actually do this. You know, you talk to most rugby league people and you're thinking, you're going to say Wales are going to beat Australia in the semi-final and take you away in a white coat, wouldn't they? You know, with white coats, people and take you in a straight jacket. So bit by bit, I remember showing them Sheffield against Wigan when Sheffield beat Wigan at Wembley as an example, and various other little things where the underdog had come good, and yeah, for 60 minutes we were good, and then from that point on, we touched the ball for about 10 minutes, and then it was you don't give Australia back-to-back sets. So they'd score, they'd kick off, they'd keep it, penalty. We didn't touch the ball because we had penalties against, remember it, and we were constantly in defending, and then eventually the strapping and the injections wore off, and they came through. I remember Matt Fittler played an outstanding captain's knock that night. He was absolutely outstanding for them. He rallied them. And yeah, they were, again, very gracious to us. They did underestimate us. And, they were floundering for 2/3 of the match, Steve, and everything that we'd planned worked. The taking the points, the drop goals, hitting it wide, hitting short sides. Kieran Cunningham was immense that night, as was, Yestin at fullback, Ian Watson at halfback, and Lee Breers, he was mercurial, absolutely mercurial. But the boys, the boys up front, they stuck to their guns, against a star-studded Australian team. And, it was probably not, you don't like going out of a job where you've had so much joy out of over the years. And I had 9 years as head coach of Wales Rugby League. But if I had to go out, it was my last game for Wales as head coach, it was in that manner. Your team given absolutely everything against the best team in the world, and it showed in the final where they just ran over New Zealand in the final. So very, very proud of all the players. I've had the privilege of coaching over the years, whether it's 95 or 2000, they've all absolutely played their hearts out every time they put that red jersey on. And even times we've been outgunned, as I said, but they've always, looked at that badge when they're in moments of crises or toughness, when their lungs are hanging out, and they've come back for more. So it was a special time, yeah.
I'll finish up. That's wonderful. I'll finish up by just asking your thoughts on what's happened since. We've had some professional clubs did happen in Wales, but they fell over and they've had financial problems, and we as a sport are still in Wales, and there's a new administration of the Welsh Rugby League. What are your thoughts on sort of what's happened since and what the future might be for the game?
Like everybody, I was disappointed when the Crusaders went under, but then we're delighted to be part of the group that sort of rejuvenated the club. And we started with a blank sheet of paper when I went in with the Crusaders, and we've established the club now, and I think it'll always be there. Touch wood. From little acorns grow big oaks, but we have got two sides in Wales. One is down in deepest West Wales again, struggling a little bit, but they seem to be getting some good players on board now, and there's ambition there. That will we'll see how that goes in the future. But in terms of north and south, yeah, let's see how far we can go. Not every sort of player in rugby union is going to play, regional rugby or even Premiership rugby, and they're probably more suited to rugby league. And if they can earn some an extra living on top of what they're doing already, and why not? Why didn't they give it a go? And there'll be plenty of those around. So there's enough rugby players to keep the conveyor belt going, and them working again like in '95, side by side with players who've been brought up in the game, can only be a good thing. So I think there's plenty of hope. I don't want to see people just throwing the towel, and I think we should persevere with it. And as the Crusaders have done, obviously got a new home now. The Crusaders have done, just keep the flag flying in the north and the south, and who knows in the future what will happen if somebody comes along and does what happens at Wrexham Football Club recently. Then you never know.
Before we go, is there anything you'd like to promote? Anything you're up to that you'd like people to know about?
Well, if you need your garden's landscaping, I'm pretty good at that now, and cutting grass and trimming trees and things like that. I'm still no good ironing and washing up, so don't get me doing that. But no, I was just to, I sort of left Doncaster. I said I needed to step down, and I think it was time for both of us to part our ways. A long time up there, and outstanding people in Doncaster and an outstanding rugby club. It was time to move on and let some fresh blood go on. As I said, I intended to take a step back, which I have done. And I'm just looking forward now. The batteries have been recharged, Steve, and I'm ready to get the tracksuit back on again and get out there and have a crack with the boys again, and get some coaching done and get some matches back on the weekend, which is the end product of what you do in the week, and where all the excitement starts, and that's what we play the game for. So that's all I'm doing at the moment, is waiting, like a lot of people, for this cloud to lift and get back to some sort of normality in the months ahead. It's still a long haul ahead of us, and I just hope our NHS will be angels, haven't they? I just hope our NHS is not overrun, and people stay safe and stay sensible. But just to wish everybody, stay safe. That's all.
I'm sure rugby league.
Yourself, of course.
I'm sure you don't miss rugby league and rugby union as much as they miss you, Clive, and you'll be back with a vengeance next year. Thanks for helping. Thanks for helping with the book last week, and thanks for coming on this week. Thank you, Clive.